is CBC News. Good afternoon, I'm Julie Buckingham. At 12 o'clock, some light flurries, -4 in downtown Winnipeg. Clearing this afternoon, the high +1. Doctors Manitoba says it is time to end the need for sick notes for short-term illnesses. The advocacy group says the papers are a waste of doctors' time and aren't effective. President Dr. Randy Guzman says the number written each year is staggering.
The amount of sick notes amounts to over 600,000 written notes per year. Eliminating sick notes would free 300,000 appointments per year, which is the equivalent of adding over 50 doctors overnight with very little cost.
Guzman says the amount of time physicians spend signing them is worth $8 million a year. He says 71% of employees say they'd rather go to work sick than get the slip. Guzman says that puts the health of others at risk. He says Manitoba hasn't followed other provinces in legislating changes to prevent this from being required. A 29-year-old man found with serious injuries being held against his will in Dauphin. RCMP were responding to a well-being check this week. The man is now being treated in hospital. After getting a warrant to search the residence, officers seized drugs, multiple firearms, and cash. 7 people have been arrested and face weapons and trafficking charges. Federal Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc and Ontario Premier Doug Ford are in Washington today. They are meeting with Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. The two are hoping to turn down the heat in the trade spat between the two nations and create the conditions for productive negotiations. Former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland is also in the U.S. She appeared on CNN today and was asked if her former opponent and new Liberal Party leader Mark Carney can handle the president.
Mark is going to be a fantastic prime minister. He's the leader of my party. He has my full support. He is going to be terrific. And he has started off on a very, very good, clear note. He has said, you need to respect us. And I would say that is the view of all Canadians.
Freeland came a distant second to Carney in the Liberal leadership race. Premier Wab Kinew says when it comes time to responding to tariffs and threats from the U.S., he is not going to show all his cards just yet. So far, Manitoba has only taken U.S. alcohol off the shelves. Kinew says he won't announce all his plans at once.
We have to be strategic, and we have to remember that this is a 4-year presidency that we're dealing with. So we definitely have some big trump cards, if you will, including with Manitoba Hydro with electricity. We've got big tools with procurement.
Kinew says Hydro spends millions of dollars on items like transformers, and not buying them from the U.S. would have an impact. Canada's Melanie Joly opening up a G7 Foreign Affairs Summit outside Quebec City. It is a 2-day gathering with newly appointed U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio at the table. Kate McKenna reports.
Melanie Joly stood next to U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio when the G7 foreign ministers paused their meetings for a photo. She has long said they have a good relationship, even as Canada's relationship with the United States hits historic lows. Rubio and Joly met privately this morning. She said she'd bring up tariffs, including the new tariff on steel and aluminum, and that she'd work to shore up support from European countries to present a united front. But it's a packed agenda. In her opening remarks, she outlined some of the things they're planning to discuss.
Want to see just and lasting peace in Ukraine. Of course, we want to foster long-term stability as well in the Middle East.
Marco Rubio hasn't answered any questions from journalists since arriving. He's been asked repeatedly whether he agrees with his boss Donald Trump's assertion that Canada should become an American state. Each time he's ignored the question. The Italian foreign minister did answer a question about the potential annexation of Canada, saying Canada will continue to be Canada. Kate McKenna, CBC News, La Malbaie, Quebec.
A U.S. envoy is meeting with Russia's President Vladimir Putin in Moscow today. The goal? To solidify a 30-day ceasefire agreement with Ukraine. Putin told reporters he's open to the idea, but the current proposal mainly favors Ukraine. Putin says Russian troops are advancing on all directions, especially in the Kursk region, and he questions who will control the ceasefire. He thanked Donald Trump for his efforts to stop the war and suggested the two of them have a phone call. Just yesterday, the U.S. reinstated financial and military support for Ukraine after Kyiv agreed to the ceasefire proposal. Ontario seeing a massive surge in measles across that province. The public health of that region says 195 new cases have been diagnosed diagnosed in the last 2 weeks. 31 patients have needed hospital care, with one child requiring intensive care. Officials say most of the cases occurring are amongst unvaccinated people. The Vatican says Pope Francis continues to get stronger and is no longer in imminent danger of death. X-rays of his lungs show improvements after he contracted double pneumonia last month. Today is the 12th anniversary of his election to the papacy. That is the CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local CBC News comes your way at 12:30. Checking your forecast in Winnipeg, a few flurries ending, then clearing this afternoon, +1. Brandon, snow ending soon. Risk of freezing rain, windy, and the temperature holding around -4. Dauphin, chance of flurries and -5. Flin Flon, a mix of sun and clouds, and -11. Thompson, sun cloud mix and high -13. Churchill, sunny and -18. You're listening to CBC Radio 1, 990 AM, 89.3 FM.
Good afternoon, Manitoba. You are listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, 97.9 FM in Brandon, on the CBC Listen app and streaming on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse. Here's what's coming up on the show today. Are you feeling fraud fatigue? A new poll suggests online fraud is up, way up. We're going to take your questions and comments during our call-in conversation at 12:30. Also, how Brandon businesses are finding new ways to hire and keep young professionals in the Wheat City. We're going to hear more coming up. But first up here on the show, with over 600,000 sick notes written every year, a new survey shows that most Manitobans want sick notes eliminated or limited from work. A new survey conducted by Doctors Manitoba shows that more than 87% of Manitobans want sick notes for work eliminated together. Manitoba is one of only 2 provinces that has not taken action to limit sick note requirements. Doctors Manitoba President Dr. Randy Guzman discussed the findings to media last hour.
I'm here to talk about sick notes. And before I do that, I just want to remind you why Doctors Manitoba is focusing on this issue. Manitoba has the biggest shortage of family doctors in Canada. We're dead last. And it's vital that we all work together to free as much of their time as possible for patient care. For the physicians we do have, administrative burden is a big issue. Burnout is very widespread, and excessive paperwork is a top contributor. Sick notes are one type of unnecessary paperwork, taking up over 36,000 hours of physician time per year. Today, we are releasing new research that shows very strong support across Manitoba for eliminating sick notes. So this support follows extensive research here and across Canada that demonstrate the impact of sick notes. So in Manitoba alone, the amount of sick notes amounts to over 600,000 written notes per year. Eliminating sick notes would free 300,000 appointments per year, which is the equivalent of adding over 50 doctors overnight with very little cost or no cost. We spent over a year consulting with public and private employers, labor groups, government, and other stakeholders. Our research showed that sick notes really aren't very effective to verify or manage sick time away from work. For over 1/3 of sick notes, patients didn't even have symptoms, so when they present to their doctors, they're not even sick. And so it's really a false verification of the time. And over 70% of workers say they would rather go to work sick than to go get a sick note at a doctor's. So that says something. That can be a big risk to workplace productivity if someone goes in and gets their coworkers sick as well. Doctor's visit just to get a sick note cost taxpayers over $8 million a year. So that's a big chunk of taxpayers' dollars. With this in mind, it's very encouraging that even amongst business owners and managers, we still see 95% support for eliminating or restricting sick notes. Currently, Manitoba is only one of 2 provinces in the country that hasn't taken any action to limit sick notes. With this research and strong public support, we hope to see Manitoba take action to eliminate sick notes as soon as possible. Eliminating sick notes is an easy step Manitoba can take, especially right now as the province looks for opportunities to add more healthcare capacity with the dollars we do have, and while they invest in Trump-proving our economy.
Can you talk to how many of these notes are actually needed? We can't, in a way, eliminate all of them.
Well, I think it depends on what the patient's presenting with. So is this a long sickness, a short sickness? I mean, it's a bit of a layered question. Is it an accommodation issue? Is it a disability issue? So for just purely sick notes for short term, they can be eliminated or limited, I think.
We've developed a definition. So a sick note is really used solely for the purpose of verifying an absence from work. And again, that research has found it's not a very effective approach to managing sick time. There's lots of other types of doctor's notes or medical certificates that do bring value, where the medical expertise is actually used to inform some actions in the workplace. And so we would call those doctor's notes or medical certificates. And so that might be somebody who's off for an extended leave because of a surgery or parental leave. It could be somebody who needs a workplace accommodation because of a disability or an injury. So those are all definitely fair game. But the 600,000 number is just sick notes to verify a short-term absence from work. And that's what we're recommending here needs to be eliminated.
That is Keir Johnson, Director of Strategy, Advocacy and Communications for Doctors Manitoba. Before him, we heard from Dr. Randy Guzman, Doctors Manitoba President. 12:12 now. Hiring and then retaining young skilled professionals has been a challenge for Manitoba businesses. That's according to a 2024 Statistics Canada report. It reveals an 8% net skill loss of young workers in the province. Brandon businesses are looking for new ways to hire and keep young workers in the Wheat City. CBC's Chelsea Kemp spoke to Cora Dupuis, Brandon University's Cooperative Education Coordinator. Chelsea first asked what makes the program unique to Brandon.
Co-op is unique in that these are full-time paid positions over the summer months. And so you really get to test drive your career or to kind of see how that employee performs.
How do you see that benefiting the city in terms of retention of young professionals?
Yeah, so what we know from the research is that early labor market attachment is critical in helping to get young people into organizations where they can see a future for themselves. And so that makes a real difference in helping those employers to find or maybe even grow the talent they're looking for.
What do you find? What are concerns when you're talking to students when they're just not sure if Brandon is their career path?
Yeah, so students sometimes think that they have to leave or go to a larger center in order to find those growth opportunities or those chances for advancement. But my message to students is that you can absolutely find those things here. And in fact, it's better to start here and launch your career before looking elsewhere.
What's it like having those conversations? Like, do you find you really have to try and break through some stereotypes?
There's certainly some false narratives that young people carry around with them that, they can't grow their career in Brandon or that there's nothing to do here. And so I'm always challenging those narratives. And the way you asked the question was like, what's it like? It's life-changing when I am able to open a doorway for a student or, paint a pathway for them in order to better understand that there are opportunities here for them to grow their career and to have an affordable and balanced life.
Do you find are there certain industries that are really turning to UNBU?
Mm-hmm. Certainly the local tech or local companies that do have tech departments are looking to BU. I'd also say, we're seeing quite a bit in terms of students with the ability to communicate or the ability to write. And so that could be any of our students who are pursuing arts degrees. And so, I happen to believe that there's like a place for everyone here in Brandon. Outmigration in Brandon has been an issue for decades, and it is something that I think as a community we need to address with a little more intentionality. We have an opportunity. We're big enough to make change, but we're small enough to have all the change makers around the same table.
What does it mean when you say that, having change makers just sitting and working together?
So I think we need individuals, institutions, and government coming together to devise a strategy in order to implement and to track our results over time to see if we're making a difference.
I know, like, we are a city that is steadily growing. Where do young people fit into that puzzle of Brandon growth?
Yeah, I think the young people are the future. They are our future city leaders and business owners and so on and so forth. And so getting them connected in a meaningful way will have a transformative impact on the future of Brandon.
How much is word of mouth helping?
Word of mouth is transformational. So when a young person joins an organization and they love it, when there is an opening within that company, they are much more likely to refer a friend or a former classmate or something like that. So if you are looking to grow the talent, by hiring one, you might actually have opportunities to hire more.
That is Cora Dupuis, Brandon University's Cooperative Education Coordinator. Now, Chelsea also spoke with Tilda Fortier, Business Manager for Brandon's Greenstone Building Products. The company is trying to hire students straight out of school to keep them in the city.
We connected with post-secondary institutions, and we said yes to opportunities to connect with students. That's been our most successful endeavor. So working with Cora and the co-op program has been really, really good. You know, what do we have to lose? Let's start making connections with students. And then I realized how much value there is in that, because when you make a good connection with one student and that student works out for you, then the next thing you know, they're recruiting their friends to come and join them, because we're a cool place to work and they spread the word.
How much time does that save, having boots on the ground here, ready to work, eager to get into careers, versus trying to recruit people from elsewhere?
Well, it's massive, because recruitment is really hard. So you can have job postings and you have to filter through all of those recruitments, and it can be really difficult. Convincing people to move here has been really challenging, and I wouldn't say it's been successful for us. We definitely have the most success building our own workforce sort of from within. So by that I mean our employees referring future employees. Sort of spread the word and say, like, this is what it's all about, so the people that are coming in know what to expect and they kind of know what's happening, and those referring employees are incentivized to make that experience good for them too. So everyone's trying to make everyone's life as easy as possible. So the sharing of knowledge and the training and all of that has been really good for us. And our experience has been that we find someone that likes the job and we like them, and we continue with them sort of part-time through the winter. It doesn't always happen, because sometimes the course load can be a lot, but typically we try to, keep our claws in those great students.
Do they build their career here?
Yes, absolutely. We take them right out of school, and we want them to build their career here and stay. And we're sort of a young family-owned business, and we think we have a lot to offer, and we think we have a great career path and a lot of growth to offer. And so that's what we try to do.
I know you're on the chamber. Do you see other businesses kind of taking this route as well, being like, essentially, if we build it, the young people will come?
Well, I think that Cora's program is growing, and people are noticing that it is the way to go. I think traditional recruitment methods, people are looking for something different now, and they want to be sort of recruited in that way from young on. We've had a lot of success with it, so I try to share as much as possible how much success we've had, and hopefully it continues to grow. Because I think in Brandon we have these great post-secondary institutions, and even Crocus Plains High School is a vocational focused institution. Let's connect with those students and get them and show them what we have to offer in Brandon, so that they stay and don't leave.
That is Tilda Fortier, the business manager for Greenstone Building Products in Brandon. You can read more on the story on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Winkler and Morden, let's talk. CBC wants to get to know you a little bit better. I'm Rosanna Hempel. CBC's Communities in Focus is coming to Winkler and Morden March 17th to 21st. What do you want us to know about your communities? What stories are we missing? I can't wait to meet you. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for details.
12:19 now. You're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse. Blowing snow -5 in Brandon right now. And in Winnipeg, we are under a cloudy sky, light snow, -3 at the airport. It is known to be the biggest ice fishing derby in Manitoba, and it happens this weekend. The annual Falcon Lake Winter Fish-Off takes place on Saturday. Hundreds of participants are expected to show up and drop a line, and there's thousands of dollars to win on the line, too. Ian Young is the organizer of the Fish-Off and joins me now. Well, hello, Ian.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me. Okay, first off, let me ask you, where are you right now?
I'm out on the ice. I'm in my truck here on Falcon Lake, and we are just starting to get the grid set up for the Derby.
What's the weather like out there right now?
Right now it's like 0 degrees and just like lightly snowing, a light breeze out of the east. So obviously we got some weather coming in, but it's not bad right now.
Remind us, first of all, what happens at the Falcon Lake Winter Fish-Off?
Oh man, it's it's a big event. We are expecting roughly 1,500 people to join us on Saturday to compete for over $80,000 worth of cash and prizes, $20,000 grand prize, Yamaha quad for second place, all kinds of random giveaways on the ice. We're raising money for the Saint Amant Foundation. There's a 50-50 for the Saint Amant Foundation that typically goes over $10,000. All kinds of cool stuff happening on the ice.
Is that the most that you've ever given away or that you are going to be giving away?
This is our biggest prize pool ever. This is the first year going to a $20,000 grand prize. And, is it our most ever? Actually, in 2018, we used to have a hidden weight prize that was an insured prize. And we gave away a $60,000 boat in 2018.
Wow.
So that was the most that we ever gave away, was our $60,000 worth of guaranteed cash and prizes plus a $60,000 boat. But the prices of insurance have gone through the roof, so we have a guaranteed hidden weight prize now. So it's a little bit different, but we are guaranteed to give away an Ice Master live scope bundle for a fish that's caught in between 1 and 5 pounds. So that's cool too.
You said that you're expecting 1,500 people. Is that the most that you will see at the Fish-Off?
So we have drawn as many as 2,000 to this event, and if the forecast was better, I'd be expecting close to that. We had a pretty strong early bird sale and a lot of interest in this year's event. But I think the forecast is going to keep some people who are on the fence home.
Because the forecast is calling for some snow, isn't it, this weekend?
Yeah, it looks like we're going to get some rain tomorrow, turning to snow on Saturday. It is what it is. This is an ice fishing derby, and every year it comes with some challenges, and it would be nice if it was 20 degrees and sunny every event, but that's not the case.
Is that weather going to affect the conditions out on the lake at all?
Yeah, for sure. It's it's really the wind that we're hoping stays down. Last year we had 60 plus kilometer-an-hour winds for this event, and that was a real challenge. Our porta potties were blowing around on the ice, and our tents were blowing over and stuff. But people, I'm always amazed at how people are excited to come out here and brave the conditions. And even right now, I'm getting a lot of calls from people who are worried that we're going to cancel the event because of the blizzard. Not so much worried about snow on the ice, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. So, where are all these people coming from? Where are all the participants coming from for the fish off?
from all over the place, we have people coming from, all over Manitoba, as far north as Thompson, as far west as Saskatchewan. I know of some people who come from BC and Alberta specifically for this event. And then, people will be driving from, we have quite a few people coming from Ontario, the Kenora, Red Lake, Dryden, Fort Francis areas. People do drive.
So this attracts people from all over Canada.
It does, yeah. All over Canada. You get the odd person coming up from the U.S. as well.
So describe to us, you're going to have people coming there this weekend. You're expecting hundreds of people. And there's also some rules, right? Like this is the second year for some new rules.
Yeah, so Manitoba has changed our fishing regulations. We're no longer allowed to keep any fish over certain sizes. So for northern pike, which is typically what we're fishing for at this event, you're not allowed to keep a fish over 75 centimeters. Now, we never have kept any fish in this event. It's always catch and release, of course, but it just complicates the way that we have to weigh them in. We used to be able to put them in a bucket and carry them to a central weigh tent in the middle of the Derby site, and we've had to switch now to have mobile weigh judges scattered around the Derby site to weigh those big fish. And so it's a little bit more, it's certainly more volunteer intensive, more work, more complicated, but in theory it's supposed to protect the fish, and we think that's important. So we do our best to comply with the regulation.
Ian, this is the 20th annual Fish Off. Why do you think this particular event has such sustained history?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. For the uninitiated, there are hundreds of ice fishing derbies across this area every year, like all over Manitoba and northwestern Ontario. But we are kind of the biggest and longest running, and people have trusted us to, I guess, do the right thing and to make sure that we're giving away all our prizes and putting on a good event that people like coming to. And and one of those things is dealing with challenging situations like the weather. People don't like it when events get canceled, and that has been the downfall of many events over the years. But obviously, you got to pay attention to the weather and make sure that everybody's safe. So,
And it's also beautiful out there too. Yeah,
I mean, this is like that. I mean, that's another reason that this event is successful, is that Falcon Lake has good fishing, and this derby is put on along a weed edge and a break line that holds a bunch of fish. So we do typically catch 120 fish or so at this event, which is pretty good. Now, when you think about maybe there's 1,500 to 2,000 people on the ice, only 10% or 5% might catch a fish, but that's pretty good as far as ice fishing derbies go, to be honest.
Well, Ian, I know you're so busy, but I really do appreciate you taking time to speak with us today here on the show. Thank you so much, and good luck with the event on Saturday.
Hey, thanks very much for having me.
That is Ian Young, the organizer of the Falcon Lake Winter Fish-Off taking place on Saturday. For more information, you can go to the website winterfishoff.ca. We are coming up here to your local news. Want to mention what's coming up here during our call-in conversation. Have you heard of fraud fatigue? That's when you're so tired of trying to keep up on top of online scams that you let your guard down. We're going to be asking you for your questions here. If you have any questions about online scams, fraud, maybe you have a story that you'd like to tell, join us for a conversation coming up here after 12:30. You're listening to Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, on the CBC Listen app and streaming on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. Stay with us. Your CBC local news is coming up next.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon. I'm Julie Buckingham in downtown Winnipeg at 12:30. Still some light flurries in the area and -3. Clearing though this afternoon and the temperature heading up to +1. It is time to end the requirement for sick notes for employees. That from Doctors Manitoba, who recently completed a survey on the requirement for workers to provide the paperwork for short illnesses. President Dr. Randy Guzman says 96% of people here support eliminating or limiting them. He adds the amount of time physicians spend on costs the province $8 million a year.
Sick notes are a time waster for physicians, and so if you count the number, it's over 600,000 Manitoba per year, and so that adds up to a lot of time that could be providing access to Manitobans.
Guzman says that time is equivalent to adding 50 family docs to the system at next to no cost. The advocacy group wants to see the province take action to limit sick notes. Only Manitoba and Alberta have yet to do so. Premier Wab Kinew is defending his cheeky approach to the trade war with the U.S. He has been very active on social media on the subject, including a post where he imitated U.S. President Donald Trump signing executive orders. Kinew considers them friendly and lighthearted and an answer to what is happening in the U.S.
Part of this is a meme war, right? Like they're talking down Canada. They're, going after our prime minister. So I would expect that whoever in the White House is doing that is going to have a sense of humor too. So we can chirp back with things like the executive order video. And, if it helps to make the choir stronger here in Manitoba.
Kinew says we need to be strategic and think long term when it comes to dealing with the next 4 years under Trump. He says besides taking U.S. alcohol off the shelves, he may look at taxing Manitoba electricity heading south and preventing American companies from getting provincial and hydro contracts. Foreign G7 leaders are gathered in Quebec to take part in discussing the lasting peace in Ukraine. A Canadian government official confirming media reports Washington vetoed a Canadian proposal for the Charlevoix summit aimed at cracking down on Russian shadow fleet oil tankers evading Western economic sanctions. The official was not authorized to speak publicly on the diplomatic issue. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly alluded to the issue in her opening remarks of the G7 foreign ministers meeting, citing the need to build on the maritime dimension of security threats. BC Hydro removing Tesla products from its electric vehicle rebate program as part of the tariff fight. Its website says the move is part of government action to give preference to Canadian goods and exclude U.S. items from rebates if practical. The rebate program covers up to 50% of the purchase and cost of installation of a home charger, up to $350. That is the CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local news at 1:30.
Thank you very much, Julie.
My pleasure.
That is Julie Buckingham with your CBC local news. You are listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. Streaming everywhere on the CBC Listen app, and we're also on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse. Coming up here during our call-in conversation, are you feeling fraud fatigue? A new poll suggests online fraud is up, way up. We're asking you if you've been the victim of an online scam. Maybe you have some questions about how to protect yourself. We want to hear from you during our conversation here. I'll give you the numbers to call. You can call us at 204-780-0893. You can also text us at 204-588-7355. But let's turn our attention now to the forecast. CBC weather specialist Riley Lachuk joins me now. And Riley, we just heard from our guest there at around 12:15.
Yep.
Fishing derby happening out at Falcon Lake this weekend. And they're bracing for some some messy weather
Ooh,
conditions,
yeah.
which you've been talking about.
Yes.
I mean, we're starting to see the snowfall here in Winnipeg.
Yeah, I mean, some light snow this morning.
Mhm.
Flurries. There's been a couple of pockets of a little bit of heavier accumulation in this, but as expected here in Winnipeg, a few flurries this morning. Most of that has pushed off out of the city, but if you're heading east on the Trans-Canada, you'll run into a few flurries. Likewise, if you're into the Interlake, north of Gimli, Arborg, Peguis, Highway 68 into the Narrows, looking at a few flurries at the moment. I mean, nothing that is too strong in nature, but certainly I'll run into a few snowflakes out there if you're heading east outside the city this afternoon. Right now, -2 in Winnipeg, 0 in Steinbach, -1s into northwestern Ontario, -5 in Brandon at the moment, -17 in Thompson. So this snow pushes off into northwestern Ontario as we get through the afternoon. I think we've got a good shot at some clearing behind that. So I think even by 5, 6 o'clock, we should get probably, I'm hoping, a few slivers of sunshine to end the day today. As we get into the day on Friday, this is when we start to see some cloud building back in. The first punch of snow pushes across northern Manitoba as we get overnight into Friday morning. The Pas, Flin Flon, Grand Rapids into Norway House, getting some snow overnight into the morning hours. As we get later into Friday, we'll see some of that pushing into Westman, Dauphin. The further east you go, the more likelihood we'll see this as freezing rain. Now, the latest model guidance has actually been pushing the main event, the southern main event, if you will, of this moving up from the States further to the east. So in Winnipeg, I think we still likely will see some patchy precipitation overnight Friday into Saturday, likely starting as rain, transitioning over to a mix or some freezing rain, and then into snow as we get into the morning hours on Saturday. But certainly east of the city, into the southeast corner of the province, into the White Shell, Falcon Lake, into northwestern Ontario, Kenora, Dryden, there is the likelihood that we'll see a fairly substantial period of some freezing rain as we head into Saturday morning. As temperatures cool, we'll see that transitioning over to snow in the afternoon. Again, I think we do have most of the model runs pushing this east of Winnipeg, but a chance at least that we'll see a few flurries into the morning hours on Saturday at this point. Accumulations, some of the forecast modeling giving places like Flin Flon, Thompson up to 25 centimeters of fresh snow by the time we get to Sunday. I'm thinking closer to that 20 centimeter mark, but certainly we could see some pockets of accumulation where we see some pretty heavy snowfall amounts. Winnipeg, Portage into the Interlake, Trace to a couple of centimeters, and a little bit more accumulation into that bullseye into northwestern Ontario as we head into the weekend. So a bit of a doozy coming. Temperatures today around the freezing mark across southern Manitoba, up to 5 in Winnipeg tomorrow. Our temperature drops to -5 on Saturday and Sunday. Some very, very strong winds behind this as well, Marjorie. So looking at northwest winds gusting up to 60 as we get through Saturday. Still windy into Sunday, and then we start to even out as we get into early next week with temperatures close to freezing once again.
Mm-hmm. And when it's windy and you got snow, it means reduced visibility.
Exactly.
So just be careful, especially if you have to head out
particularly
on the road.
East of the city.
Yeah.
West of the city, not so much. North of the city, not so much. But if you're heading east, anywhere into northwestern Ontario, we're likely going to see some very tricky driving conditions into the weekend.
All right. Thanks a lot, Riley.
You're welcome. That's
CBC weather specialist Riley Lachuk with a look at your forecast. And Riley, we'll have more tonight on CBC Winnipeg News at 6 on CBC Television, also streaming on CBC Gem. It is 12:37 now, and you're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse. Are you feeling fraud fatigue? That's when you're so tired of staying vigilant, monitoring online scams, that you let your guard down. A new poll shows more than 1/3 of Canadians surveyed are finding it tough to keep up. It's the RBC 2025 Fraud Prevention Month poll. It also finds that 98% of Canadians have been seeing more targeted and sophisticated scams. Almost 2/3 have received very personalized fraud attempts. And so we're asking you, have you been finding it tough to keep up with potential fraud? And what kinds of frauds or scams have you experienced? Maybe you have some questions about how to protect yourself, how to find out if something is a scam. Here are the numbers to call: 204-7800-893, 204-7800-893. You can text us at 204-588-7355, 204-588-7355. Joining me now is Jeff Morton, RBC Senior Director of Fraud Strategy. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me so much, Jeff.
Thank you for having me.
I mentioned a few of the findings there in the introduction, but give us an overview. What are some of the key findings that this poll has revealed?
Yeah, you really hit on a lot of the highlights there that we've seen that Canadians are feeling the effects of fraud. They know that scam attempts are not only becoming more frequent, but they're becoming more sophisticated and more personalized, and which is all resulting in it becoming a lot harder for them to detect that it actually is a fraud. It's a lot of unknowns whether they're dealing with legitimate sources or fraudulent sources these days. And what's a little bit worrying in the survey is that we saw that about a third of people who responded admitted to letting their guard down. And unfortunately, that's the toll that it takes. When you feel that fraud fatigue, that's what fraudsters are preying on. They need that moment of weakness. They're looking for that emotional response. And if they can get it, it just takes one time for you to put your guard down for the fraud to happen.
So tell us a little bit more about how sophisticated some of these scams are becoming.
Yeah, so we know because of all of the data breaches that have happened over the years, the data that they have collected through social media that we willingly put out into the world, there's enough personalized information. And then with the growth of AI and Gen AI tools, it's a lot easier for fraudsters to do mass campaigns that are just very specifically targeted. They'll have your name, they may have your address information, and they're becoming so sophisticated because they're able to take all of this data, package it together in a meaningful way, and hand it off to the customer to say, here's a scam attempt, and it looks like it's directed directly at you.
We are speaking with Jeff Morton, RBC Senior Director of Fraud Strategy. We're asking you about whether or not you've been a victim of a scam or a fraud. Maybe there's a story you'd like to share. Maybe you have some questions for Jeff here. The number to call 204-780-0893, 204-780-0893. You can also text us at 204-588-7355, 204-588-7355. Jeff, I want to ask you, why is it that we're seeing so much more, fraud fatigue? Why are people letting their guards down a little bit more?
Yeah, I think a lot of it just comes to the amount of fraud that we're seeing, the number of attempts that are out there, in a large part because technology has enabled the fraudsters to do this at a scale that we've never seen before. The other big change that we've seen, and I think why the scam problem is getting worse, is that what we had seen in the last number of years was that fraudsters tried to get access to your account and send your money out of your account without you even knowing. And that was really what their focus has been. But because of the investments that the banks have made and other technology companies have made, it's become a lot harder for fraudsters to do that. Plus all the education that we've been giving out for a number of years about protecting your passwords and your online credentials. So now that it's too hard for the fraudsters to do it themselves, what they are doing instead is targeting the clients and trying to take advantage of the people who own those accounts. Because if they can convince them to do the transaction on their behalf, it has a higher success rate of going through. And so the investment in targeting clients with these social engineering techniques, with these new targeted ads or personalized scams is all in the effort to get you to send your hard-earned money to them.
It's not that we want people to, just get off social media or stop doing stuff online, but how do you protect yourself then, since we rely so heavily on doing things online?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think one of the other findings in the survey was that 71% of people who responded said that they just don't trust the communication that they get anymore. And that's really what the fraudsters are after, is they're looking to create this distrust in our communication channels because they can take advantage of that by creating an emotional response with you, whether that's fear because they're telling you that there's a problem with your account, whether that's greed because you have a great investment opportunity. They're really trying to take advantage of that moment. And so our single biggest piece of advice as part of Fraud Prevention Month this year is we're encouraging people to stop, to pause, and to keep their guard up. If you are ever unsure about a conversation that you're having, if you think it's with your bank, feel free to hang up and call back to the number on your credit card or your debit card and make sure that you know who you're talking to. The whole selling point for the fraudsters is to create that urgency. They need you to do this now. That's not how the banks operate or how other companies will operate. And so our best advice is to stop, pause, keep your guard up, call a friend, call the company back. Just take that extra moment to not feel like you have to respond in the moment and try and get that clarity about the situation as well.
And I want to talk about the personalized part of it because, as you mentioned, banks will communicate with you only in certain ways. So, how do you distinguish then between a legitimate message from your financial institution versus what could be a personalized scam? And I especially worry about this too because I have older parents who are not exactly, technologically savvy. And so sometimes, I'll get a question from my mom like, I can't tell the difference. So how can you distinguish between how your bank will communicate with you and then also what could be a fraud message?
Yeah, and that's certainly one of the challenges that we saw communicated through the survey results as well. It depends on the method of communication. So when your bank contacts you through an SMS, they will have a short code, which is not a phone number, but a short series of digits that is unique to them, and it was assigned to them by a telco company. All of this information about how the banks can contact you would be on the website, so you know specifically if you get a text message with that short code, it is from your bank. We're also seeing more investment into being able to brand your messages as well through those channels, which I think does help. Anything that you would see within the property of the bank, like online banking or mobile banking, or within the telephone channel, that is obviously owned by the banks and going to be official lines of communication. We do highly encourage people to use the mobile app as much as possible. That is a very secure space for you to bank. We have a lot of great information and education in the flows as well to help people stay informed about what fraud looks like. And again, if you're ever unsure, you can reach out and you can call the bank and ask, did you contact me about this offer? Was this a real email that I got? And we will know if it is or not. So I think tying back to that stop and pause advice, it's the same thing with these communications. If you're not sure, don't engage with it and go to a source that you know you can trust.
We are speaking with Jeff Morton, RBC Senior Director of Fraud Strategy. We're taking your questions, your comments. We'd like to ask you, or we're throwing out the question out there, have you ever been the victim of fraud or scam? Have you been finding it tough to keep up with potential fraud? We'll take your questions here. Again, the number to call is 204-7800-893, 204-7800-893. You can also text us at 204-588-7355, 204-588-7355. Jeff, I want to ask you, some people might feel embarrassed about getting scammed. How can stigma around being scammed affect people reporting it?
Yeah, it's a really big problem. So we know the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre reported that in 2024, there was $638 million lost to fraud in this country. But they also estimate that that's based on only about a 5 to 10% reporting rate. So it's really only the tip of the iceberg. And I think you touched on a really important part there, which is that people do feel embarrassed when they fall victim to a scam. And it's a challenging emotional situation that they're going through. Not reaching out is a challenge for a number of reasons. One is we don't know the full size of the picture and how big certain problems are if it isn't reported. So we don't know where to focus our efforts. But also just to get that emotional support that you need to get through it, to get the help, whether it be emotional or financial support. We really do encourage people to report any instances of scams because the overall ecosystem will learn how to better protect and how to better educate based on the experiences that we hear about.
I want to ask you, Jeff, you looked into the numbers by region. What did you learn from respondents living in Manitoba and Saskatchewan?
Yeah, we found that for the most part, the numbers were very much in line with the national averages, but except for, I would say, maybe 2 or 3 main differences. The first one that really stood out to me is that we actually saw a higher percentage, 7% higher than the national average in the prairie provinces, saying that they are having a harder time identifying the scams. The same percentage above the national average are saying that they have let their guard down more often. So that's a little bit worrying as well. We do see, though, for the most part, that the ability to recognize scams and the ability to understand that protecting yourself from scams is a top priority was very much in line with the very high results that we saw from the national averages.
Jeff, we have Owen on the line. Hi, Owen.
Good afternoon.
What's your comment?
Well, I would, the the comment that your guest made about reaching out to the bank to verify things, it would be a lot easier when I call my local number here in Russell, that if I didn't get onto some answering machine and press buttons and this and that, it would be nice to have a person answer the phone.
Thank you so much.
I guess it's a comment, not a question.
Yeah, thank you so much for your comment, Owen. As we heard there, Jeff, Owen is saying that to make it easier to kind of contact the bank if they do have any questions or concerns about talking about fraud.
Yeah, for sure. So I think all of the numbers to reach the fraud department are on the website. So if you have a specific concern about fraud, the numbers to reach us more directly would be on the website. If you're not so sure how to navigate that, then calling the central number and then going through the menu options will get you to ultimately where you need to be.
We have Marie on the line. Hi, Marie.
Hi. I just wanted to address an issue and also at the same time find out how to proceed. And I'd like to talk with the gentleman here how to proceed with trying to even navigate the reporting of it. And it's with regard to ordering something online. The first and only time I ever did that turns out to be a company who charged me double. And then, apart from that, I didn't even know they had billed me twice as much. And then it turns out to be an American funds, not Canadian funds. So there's that additional charge. And then it takes 3 months to get here. And then there's duty on it, customs duty. So now I didn't accept the parcel because I knew at that point I had been charged like 4 times what I expected to be charged. And now they want $40 of customs duty as well. So what was supposed to be $49 Canadian turns out to be almost $250 Canadian. So,
thank you, Marie. So let's. There's a lot to unpack here, Jeff. First of all, Marie is talking about something that has happened to her personally. What do you do if you think that you've been scammed? How can you? Is there any way to retrieve the funds? Who do you report it to?
Yeah, so that particular example is what we would call a dispute, where you do buy something legitimately, but then the price wasn't what you wanted. You had all these extra fees on top of it. I would encourage Marie to call her bank, file that dispute, and work with them to see what can be done in that particular situation. In a more general sense, the sooner that the scam events can be reported, the better to increase the odds of potential recovery. Oftentimes, what the fraudsters will do to sort of hide the funds is as soon as it gets received in one account, they will very quickly move it to many other accounts. And every hop it takes, it's a lot harder for us and other banks to trace where it went to ultimately recover it. So again, back to the need to report fraud and scams as quickly as possible. It also helps to better increase the rates of recovery to see what can be done for that particular case and offset what occurred.
Jeff, I'm also interested to say you are the victim of fraud. I mean, how easy is it to recoup what you've lost or to get back, what you were scammed out of?
So I think a lot of it will depend on how the funds were sent and where they were sent. We know that can often create challenges when you start to go cross borders, as depending on the jurisdiction that it's going in and what their banking laws are, that can prohibit recovery attempts. So again, coming back to reporting it as soon as you identify that it has happened can certainly help to maximize the potential of getting the money back.
Jeff, I want to ask you too, because so many people are reporting being victims of fraud or scams, and we're seeing so many more frauds and scams these days. What are some preventative measures that can be put in place or have been put in place to prevent people from becoming victims of scams and frauds?
Yeah, so education remains the number one defense against scams. The challenge in this space is there are so many different types of scams and they're constantly evolving. And so we need to make sure that the tools are given to clients to help keep themselves informed. For example, if you go to the RBC website, we have a scam alerts page, which has the latest information on what we're seeing. There's lots of other reputable sources like the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, the Canadian Bankers Association, that will put out all of this information as well. So staying informed about what is out there will certainly be a great advantage to being able to identify whether it's a scam or not. And also talking to your family, to your friends, to your loved ones. You may feel like you are not susceptible to this. You might think that you can spot what's fake and what's real, and that's great. Use that superpower and help other people learn as well. To your point, people are often very ashamed of reporting this. We need to talk about it a lot more. We need to break down that barrier that scams are not something that we want to talk about. We need to make sure that we're protecting our friends and our family, and especially the more vulnerable parts of those generations, right? Our older family members, our kids, and really just making it a broader topic of conversation. And then layering on top of that, the technology tools that exist. So making sure you're using the mobile app where it's offered, to have multi-factor authentication at sign-in, to have alerts set up on your account, and just generally making sure that you're aware of the activity happening in the account. But again, I think ultimately it comes down to stop, pause, keep your guard up, and stay informed about what's happening.
Jeff, thank you so much. So much important information here. We really do appreciate you joining us on the show today and taking questions.
Thank you so much for having me.
Jeff Morton is Senior Director of Fraud Strategy at RBC, based in Toronto.
Guys, I thought they were pretty smart, but you got being right down to an art. You think you're a genius, you drive me up the wall. You're regular, original, know it all. Oh, yeah, you think you're special. Oh, you think you're something else. Okay, so you're a rocket scientist. That don't impress me much. So you got the brains, but have you got the touch? Now don't get me wrong, yeah, I think you're alright, but that won't keep me warm in the middle of the night. That don't impress me much. Oh yeah, yeah. I never knew a guy who carried a mirror in his pocket and a comb up his sleeve, just in case. All that extra whole gel in your hair ought to lock it, 'cause heaven forbid it should fall out of place. Oh, yeah, you think you're special. Oh, you think you're something else. Okay, so you're Brad Pitt. That don't impress me much. So you got the looks, but have you got the touch? Now don't get me wrong, yeah, I think you're alright, but that won't keep me warm in the middle of the night. You're one of those guys who likes to shine his machine. You make me take off my shoes before you let me get in, and I can't believe you kiss your car goodnight. Now come on baby, tell me, you must be joking, right? Oh, yeah, you think you're special. Oh, you think you're something else. Okay, so you got a car. That don't impress me much.
That was Billy Ann with her take on Shania Twain's That Don't Impress Me Much. It's the latest cover tune shared as part of the Juno Sessions. You can hear more at cbcmusic.ca/Junos. Well, that brings us to the end here of Radio Noon. Thank you so much for joining us today here on the show. I want to thank our incredible team. Our tech is Marshall Hodgkins, director Sierra Sanders, producer Wendy Parker. Our YouTube live stream director is Brad Lillies. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse. Have a wonderful day. Stay warm, stay safe out there. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Stay tuned here to CBC Radio 1 coming up next, Quirks and Quarks. Have a good one.